Imagine this, a public execution so brutal that Roman and Jewish historians recorded every detail. A burial site whose exact location has been known and venerated for 2,000 years. And a body that was never, ever recovered. With Easter just days away, what if the resurrection of Jesus isn't just a fairy tale, but the single best explanation that fits the evidence we actually have? Former atheist journalist Lee Strobel, in The Case for Christ, investigated the resurrection the same way he chased down tough stories for the Chicago Tribune, looking for holes, contradictions, and weak links. Cold case homicide detective J. Warner Wallace went even deeper in Cold Case Christianity and Case Closed, treating the entire account like an unsolved first-century murder. Both followed the evidence wherever it led, even when it challenged their assumptions. Here's what changed everything for them. First, Jesus was undeniably dead, not passed out, not faking it. 5 independent non-Christian sources, including Josephus, confirm the crucifixion. Medical experts today, as Strobel documents, point to the spear wound in the side and the unmistakable flow of blood and water as proof of cardiac rupture. A common objection is the swoon theory. Maybe he just passed out. But Wallace the detective asks, could a half-dead man, beaten beyond recognition, roll away a multi-ton stone, overpower armed guards, and convince his followers he had conquered death? The medical and historical record says no. Second, we have an eyewitness creed recorded in 1 Corinthians 15 that virtually all scholars, believers and skeptics alike, date to within months, literally months, of the crucifixion. It names specific people, Peter, James, the 12, and over 500 others who saw Jesus alive. You might wonder, didn't the story just grow into legend over centuries? Wallace explains that's impossible here. This is a first-century news bulletin, circulated while the eyewitnesses were still alive to confirm it. As Wallace points out, if there had been any errors in this story, the eyewitness would have corrected it. And even within that same creed, Paul acknowledges that if he hasn't truly risen, the Christian faith is all for naught. Would a man who'd previously persecuted Christians suddenly give up his lifestyle and risk death to preach an account he wasn't absolutely certain was true? Third, the tomb was empty. Everyone in Jerusalem knew exactly where the body had been laid, Joseph of Arimathea's tomb, the site now beneath the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And just last year, in 2025, Italian archaeologists uncovered something remarkable. Traces of an ancient garden right there, olive trees and grapevines, exactly as John described 2,000 years ago, confirmed by pollen and archaeobotanical analysis. A skeptic might say, maybe the disciples stole the body. But think like a detective with Wallace. If the body had been moved, the Jewish leaders or Roman authorities, who had every motive to end this movement, could have produced it and shut Christianity down in a single afternoon. They never did. Not only this, but the tomb was guarded by Roman soldiers who would themselves be put to death had they let anyone break in. Do you think these soldiers would really allow that to happen? Or maybe it was the wrong tomb? Not possible. The location was public knowledge from day one. Fourth, the people who claimed to see him alive were radically transformed. Those same disciples who scattered in fear on Friday were suddenly willing to be tortured and executed for what they said they witnessed. Wallace calls this textbook cold case evidence. Empty tomb, plus multiple eyewitnesses, plus a total life change with zero motive to lie. Even Paul, the guy who was actively hunting Christians, and James, Jesus' own skeptical brother, became bold believers after claiming to see the risen Jesus. People don't die for a lie they know is false. You might hear the idea that they all just hallucinated, that grief or wishful thinking caused them to see Jesus. But here's what makes that unlikely. Hallucinations are deeply personal experiences, like private dreams. Medical and psychological experts point out there are no well-documented cases of large groups, or even coordinated small groups, having the exact same detailed interactive hallucination at the same time. What we sometimes call mass hysteria usually shows up as shared anxiety symptoms like fainting or trembling. Not everyone seeing and talking with the same person who eats fish, shows nail scars, and gives instructions. On top of that, these appearances didn't happen in one emotional moment. Jesus showed himself over a period of 40 days, at different times, in different places, to different people, including skeptics. Hallucinations don't typically stretch out like that in a coherent, repeated way. They tend to be brief and fragmented, not sustained conversations and proofs over more than a month. As Strobel and Wallace both examine, the hallucination theory simply doesn't account for the full set of facts. And then there's the Shroud of Turin, one more intriguing physical clue that keeps pointing in the same direction. In 1978, a team of more than 40 scientists from the Shroud of Turin Research Project, STURP, spent 5 full days examining it with the best technology available. Their peer-reviewed findings, published in multiple scientific journals, were striking. The image on the cloth isn't painted, dyed, or drawn. There are no pigments, no brushstrokes, and no evidence of any artistic technique. The discoloration is only on the very topmost fibers of the linen, barely 0.2 of a micron deep, and it somehow encodes 3-dimensional information that modern computers can still read today, like a photographic negative of a real human body. The bloodstains? They test as real human blood, type AB, with bilirubin levels that indicate severe trauma, exactly what you'd expect from a scourged and crucified man. Recent studies have even found serum halos around the stains, visible under ultraviolet light, consistent with a body that was wrapped unwashed in spices and linen, just as the Gospels describe. Skeptics sometimes point to a 1988 carbon dating test that suggested the cloth was medieval, but later analysis of the raw data, finally released after years, showed the sample came from a repaired corner with invisible reweaving and contamination. Newer peer-reviewed research using wide-angle X-ray scattering on the actual linen dates it to around the 1st century, matching ancient samples from Israel. DNA traces on the cloth also point to passage through the Middle East, including microbes from saline environments like the Dead Sea. Even today, no one, using any known artistic or scientific method, has been able to duplicate the image. Researchers, including former skeptics on the STURP team like photographer Barry Schwartz, say these features continue to defy easy explanations. Yet the details line up precisely with the gospel accounts of Jesus' crucifixion and burial. Strobel and Wallace both walked in as doubters. They examined every alternative theory: stolen body, wrong tomb, legend, hallucination, survival, and one by one the evidence ruled them out. The resurrection, they concluded, is the only explanation that accounts for all the facts. The death, the early eyewitness testimony, the empty and publicly known tomb, the transformed lives, and even the physical artifacts that still puzzle scientists today. Look, if your heart is even a little open this Easter, maybe it's worth taking a second look for yourself. Not because anyone's trying to win an argument, but because the cumulative weight of the historical, medical, archaeological, and forensic evidence is stronger than most of us were ever told.